How many people remember that cartoon? We all dated ourselves when we said that, by the way. First of all, my name is Randy. My son is here with me. The rest of my family wasn't able to be here today, but thank you for having us. And I have known Mark a long time. I thought I'd start off with a couple of stories about if I wanted to actually be like him, I'd have a vest on and some really hip shoes or something, and I'd be, to be like Mark. But Mark is one of the greatest guys I know, one of the nicest men. You're very blessed to have him here, and it's so funny. I think back to some stories. Mark and I did a winter camp for high school students. He was in Middletown, and I was in Worcester, and we did it at a ski resort in Pennsylvania. And we get there, and first of all, Mark's van breaks down on the way, so we start late. And then the next day, you're on a ski trip, but it rained, and we were skiing in slush for in fact, there was big green patches you'd have to look out for. And can anything else go wrong? And then the day we're supposed to leave, we got a snowstorm, and the buses couldn't get in, so for 6 hours, the place wouldn't let us do anything because we were no longer insured. So kids had to sit. It was like, but the worst part of it was, I remember the speaker, Mark and I were sitting there, and he got an intestinal flu. And he'd be speaking, and all of a sudden he'd get really fast. And he's going quicker. Mark's like, what's going on? Like, his talk was going so well, and then he'd finish it, and you'd see him run for the back of the room. I'm like, what is going on? Finally, he told us, I am so sick right now. And so we had a lot of fun. I remember on a flight once with Mark, and we were running late. We were at a conference, and Mark and I were flying back to Ohio, and you're running late again, and I just wanted to get home. And so then we ran into traffic. I think we're in Baltimore, but we ran into traffic, and so I grab my bag out of the car, and I just take off. I'm running. I go, let's go, Mark. And I go taking off, right? And I'm dodging. I'm doing like the old commercials, right? I'm dodging people in the airport, and I get there, and I'm sweating. I'm breathing hard. I get my bag up top, and I'm like, where's Mark? And a few minutes later, everyone's on the plane but Mark. I'm like, he's not going to make it. They're going to close. And Mark walks on smiling, happy. Oh, let me help you. He's putting the bags up on everybody, like literally putting everyone's bags up on the top. And I'm like, now I feel so guilty because I have been so selfish pushing, and I got to get there. I got to run. And Mark's talking to everybody. Finally, the flight attendant said, could you please be seated, sir? Like, because he was talking to everybody. And so, so that's Mark. Today, as we talk a little bit about transformation, and Luke 19, one of our greatest goals as followers of Jesus is that we be transformed, that our lives are different because we follow Jesus Christ. Just like those robots that are everyday normal machines, if you've seen them, cars or trucks or whatever they are, they transform into something spectacular, something incredibly cool. And every little boy loves them. I mean, they fight with them and all that. They've made way too many movies about them. I know that. But it's something when we talk about a transformation in our hearts. How does this happen? How are our lives changed? I want to start off today in talking a little bit about how transformation takes place. And I have a good friend in Scotland. I have to say, I spent 9 years going back and forth to Scotland helping to start a ministry there. And a good friend of mine is a guy named Brian. And some of my information today I actually stole from Brian. So if you ever heard this and I didn't say that, I'd be in big trouble. So I wanted to tell you. But I want to look at a series of R's that I think we can look at for transformation. The first is rules. If we just have the right rules, our life will be okay, and our lives will be changed. The right laws. If we just pass the right laws in our country, right? It'll transform our behavior. I remember in Scotland once, I was crossing a street, and there was a bunch of trash on the side of the street, and this gal goes, I can't believe it. We just need to have more laws passed to stop this. And I thought, Doesn't everyone know littering's wrong? I mean, we all know we shouldn't do that. If any of you drive and someone keeps telling you, you need to slow down. My daughter, I have a very sassy daughter, okay? She's a freshman in high school and she knows everything. She probably does know everything, but she'll always tell me, oh, does a pastor drive that fast? Which only makes you want to do what? Go faster. That's right, Debbie. That's it. It's like, all right, don't be saying that to me. So, and if you're like me, this tells you a little bit of a window into my life. How many of you have a GPS? Okay? When it tells you the time you're going to arrive, that's exactly right. Every minute I'm ahead of it, I'm like, it's one more minute. And Martha's like, hey, listen, why don't we, I go, I can't stop. I've got 5 minutes. I've caught up already. We're getting there 5 minutes. And then all of a sudden the traffic, you get a traffic jam. And I'm like, no way. I've lost 2 of the minutes. I already caught up. You know, and it's like, what's wrong with us? At least me, I don't know. But rules do not change our hearts. Laws does not transform us. Are laws important? Of course they are. But it doesn't change us from the inside out. It doesn't change who we are. I know, how about role models? If we have the right role models, gives us something to aspire to, something to go after. I have a couple of pictures there. I want to say, let's take a look at this. I love this. You know, like children look up to their parents. I love the little guy cutting the grass and the mom and the daughter doing yoga. Like a role model we can look up to. I remember a ministry called the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and they had a poem called Little Eyes Upon You. And it was really for high school athletes to remember that there's younger kids looking up to them. When I was a kid, my role model was my dad. He was a high school coach, and I just loved to follow him around everywhere. As I got older, as I wrestled, there's a guy named Dan Gable, if you've ever heard, that I was just like, okay, read everything I could about the man. My young life leader became a role model. And so I think role models are important. But once again, does it really change us from the inside out? Change us from on who we can be? How about relationships? Relationships are vital, and we all know that relationships, we spend so much time doing so many other things, and yet at the end of our lives, the one thing we always look back on and wish we'd spent more time on is the area of relationships, isn't it? In 1 Corinthians 15:33, it says, bad company corrupts good morals. Who you choose to be with in relationships is very important. But once again, even those relationships are influences from the outside. What changes our hearts? How do we get changed from the inside out? Here's one, religion. Good old-time religion, if we just find religion. I remember a friend once gave me a definition of religion, and this is what he said. Religion is man's attempt to find God. And so we work as hard as we can so we can get closer to God. And I know being a Christian isn't always easy, but it's about so much more than our attempts to get to God. How about the last one? A redeemer. An interaction, an encounter with a redeemer. That is where transformation begins. That is where transformation begins. I want us to look at Luke chapter 19. Thank you for reading that today, Debbie. It starts off, he entered Jericho and was passing through, he being Jesus. And behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. Let's think about this for just a second. Zacchaeus was not just a tax collector, but the chief tax collector. What do we know? Well, at that time in Israel, they had been taken over by the Romans. And as the Romans would then collect taxes from all the people, they would transcribe or take people from Israel to be traders, to be the tax collectors. And so Zacchaeus wasn't just a tax collector, he was the head of the tax collectors in that area. And so the Romans would say, if I need to collect $50 from you, if I can collect 80, 30 goes to the tax collector's pockets and the other 50 goes to the Romans. There was probably, think about this, they're collecting money from the coffers of their own people to give it to the people that have conquered them. Probably no one is hated in town as Zacchaeus. And so he was very rich. How did he get to be rich? From the pockets of the people that were in that area. He stole money from people to become rich. It says, and he was seeking to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he could not, because he was small in stature. So he ran on ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was about to pass that way. Isn't it interesting? Even Zacchaeus knows that Jesus is coming. How did Zacchaeus find out? It says that he got there and the crowds were so big, because he was short, he couldn't see him. Now think for a second with me. There's no Instagram, no tweets, no Facebook, no texts, no cell phones, no radio, no television, no newspapers. It is all word of mouth. It's all word of mouth. And Zacchaeus, even Zacchaeus, who everyone can't stand, has heard the stories. It has gone everywhere. When you're excited about something, do you talk about it? Do you share it with others? Because word about Jesus has spread. Are we excited about Jesus enough to still be sharing and spreading the news about who this guy is and what he's about? So it says he wants to go see Jesus. But because of the crowd, he was small in stature, and because of the crowd, he could not. So he ran ahead. I get the picture of a lot of elbows coming down. Zacchaeus is trying to get in the crowd and look, and this is my one chance. This guy I can't stand, they box him out. They wouldn't let him in. He tries to push in here. They're not letting him see. And so he sees a tree off in the distance, and he runs ahead to go be in that. Embarrassing, I don't want to say how many years ago, but I was in college, and Ronald Reagan was running for office. So you can do the math. And Ronald Reagan was coming, and he was flying in on Marine One, the helicopter, to Bowling Green State University. It was the first stop in his tour for re-election. And I couldn't see anything in the crowd. Now, I was standing next to a man. His name was Vic Kales, and Vic Kales was the largest NCAA college player in the United States that year. He played offensive tackle at about 440 pounds, I think. He was 6'8", an all-state wrestler, and he said, "Can you see?" And I said, "No." And Vic didn't ask. He put his hands under me. I'm a large man. He put his arms under me and put me on his shoulders like I was a little kid. And then at that moment, I got uncomfortable because I started looking, and there was guys on top of buildings. I thought, how many crosshairs are on me right now? Like I was like, oh my gosh, this is a little scary. This is after Reagan had been shot once. I thought, get me down. But I felt a little bit like that story. I couldn't see, and so I climbed up Vic Kales to literally see the president. So he's up in the tree. And it says this, and when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today." Isn't that interesting? What does Jesus say? I want to be with you. We're going to spend time together. What do we know? He's hated. People don't like him. Think about some of the people Jesus interacts with. How about a paralytic? How about the woman at the well, a Samaritan? The woman caught in adultery. Jesus goes to people that are hurting, that maybe others don't look at the same way. And Jesus sees the beauty and the treasure that they are. And he looks at Zacchaeus and he goes, we're hanging out. You and I'm going to your house. We're hanging out today. What do you think everyone else is thinking at that moment? Jesus, this guy's a mess. Then Jesus was looking to see where the Holy Spirit was working. See, I think Jesus, as he walked, it says he emptied himself. And as God in the flesh, he looks up and says, okay, the Holy Spirit's speaking to him and says, that man. And he stops. I love that he knew Zacchaeus' name, by the way. I don't know if he heard people screaming it, or if he had met them, or if God revealed it, but he knew it. And he said, Zacchaeus, come on down. And it says he hurried and came down and received Jesus joyfully. Joyfully. The fact that someone wanted to be with him brought him joy. And when he saw it, they all grumbled. He's gone to be the guest of a man who is a sinner. I love the fact that he received him joyfully. My friends, the Andersons are here. We have been a part of a ministry called Celebrate Recovery. I don't know, do you guys have that here? Have you heard of it before? It's a recovery program, but it's for hurts, habits, and hang-ups that people are dealing with. And one of the things I love about Celebrate Recovery is that people that are there are thinking, I need Jesus to get through today. I need Jesus to get through this week. Honestly, I think a lot of times we begin to think, I've kind of got this, Jesus. I've got it figured out. I'm doing okay. But when something goes wrong, I'll let you know. And we may not say that, but I think we live like that. I've got a good job. I've got money in the bank. Jesus, I'm doing fine. I don't really need you. The truth is, you and I need Jesus as much as the person recovering. We just don't admit it. And I love that. It says he received him joyfully. Is that how we receive Jesus? Jesus, I'm so thankful that you are with me today. I need you today. I need to follow you each and every moment. It says, Zacchaeus stood up and said, Lord, now listen to this, behold, the half of my goods I give to the poor. And if I've defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold. And Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, since he also is a son of Abraham, for the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. He's saying, I'm going to pay back, I'm giving half of my things away if I've cheated anyone. He has cheated many people, is my guess. And he's paying it back 4 times. A few minutes ago, money was the focus of his life. Something has changed. We finally got here. Transformation is taking place. He has gone from the focus of, it's all about how much money. I'll be a traitor to my own people for the money, to now I'm giving it all away. What changed? He had an encounter with the Redeemer. Jesus looked at him and said, look, I want to be with you. Isn't that what he says to you and I? I want to be with you. I love you. I'm hanging out with you today. And that changes our lives. Jesus Christ wants to be with us so much, he's willing to go to the cross for us. I want to be with you. And that interaction with him changes everything. Zacchaeus' life is not the same than it was a few minutes ago. And it says, today salvation has come to this house, since he is also a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. You know, for some of us that maybe have had an interaction with the Redeemer in the past, the amazing thing about following Jesus is he wants to do that every day, every moment. Are we spending time with him? Are you giving him a chance to speak to your heart each day? Are you getting some times of solitude and silence to sit and to be with him? To spend time in his word and let him to speak to your heart? Just to allow him to love you. I had my second son, I don't know, it was almost like he had no bones. Like when you pick him up, he could wiggle in such a way that I couldn't hold him. I'm like, I'm a big man, I can hold him. He'd be wiggling and off running again, you know, and all I wanted to do was sit him on my lap. And he would be, you know, wiggle out of my arms and off running again. How many times are we so busy wiggling to get away, and all God wants is for us to sit with him, to be with him? But we're so busy. We're so busy. A couple of things that will help us in transformation. I got to speak in a Young Life camp in upstate New York in a place called Saranac a number of years ago. And I was speaking to adults. It was a camp run just like we do for teenagers for adults. And there was a developer, a home developer, I believe he was from Baltimore. And after I was done speaking, he came up to me and said, I want you to know, as I look back in high school, I was involved in Young Life in high school. It was the greatest time of my life because I felt so close to God. And I asked him, are you involved with a church somewhere? He goes, no, I was for a little while, but I'm not anymore. And I let him know that there was churches all over Baltimore that would love to have him be there and be a part of it and to welcome him in, that his relationship with Christ didn't just have to be something he looked back on that was about a high school time. You know what his comment was? He said, my life has gotten so complicated, I can't imagine that. I can't imagine my life the way it is today, that Christ would still want to be with me. My family, he'd just gone through a divorce and he was struggling. The reality is that Christ wants to be with us as much today as he did the first day we spent time with him, the first time we met him. That's what he wants. A couple of things that will help us. A couple of verses. Romans 12:2 says this, do not be conformed any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. How do we renew our minds? We spend time in his word, and we allow the way we think to be different. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. It starts with a thought. A thought leads to a feeling, then to an action to a habit to a character, and a destiny. But it starts with a thought. Renew your mind. Spend time in his word. Proverbs 27:17 says, as iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another. We talked about relationships a few minutes ago, but it's really important for us to have people in our lives that help impact us, to hold us accountable, to encourage us. One of the things I'm doing now as part of a ministry, I'm just starting it this September. I talked with a good friend of mine who works for an organization called the Navigators. 84% of pastors in a survey said they didn't feel like they had a single person they could be totally honest with. 84%. That they didn't feel they could be transparent about their lives. If their marriage was struggling, who would they talk to? If their finances were, who can they talk to? And so we're getting together a group of 10 pastors on the west side of Cleveland, in Avon, where we're going to be that for each other. And that whatever said, this is a safe place for us to be. Do you have people in your lives like that? If you're struggling, you can talk to. If you're excited, you can talk to. But people who will walk with you. It's so important. In Matthew 14, we're told the story of Peter stepping out of the boat, right? And Peter is the only person other than Jesus to ever walk on water. Yes, he sank, but he did walk on water for a few steps. And then he looked around, and I'm just amazed he stepped out of the boat. Because I'm just going to sit down here for a few minutes. I'm not going to do this. He did. Here's my question for us. When you step out and do something that's a little bit scary or adventurous for you, who grows? Who's transformed? We are. The seniors that we just saw, they're going to go off to college. That can be a time of incredible growth in your walk with Christ, almost like you've never experienced before. Or you look back and say, I wasted those years. When we step out and we literally risk in getting involved in a ministry we haven't done before, beginning to reach out to some neighbors, when we do some things that are a little bit scary, our lives are transformed. Our lives are transformed. How many of us want to be transformed to be more like Christ? It starts on the inside. I want you to look at this. I have a picture here for us. A rose. So my father, when my mom and dad were moving to a new house in Bay Village, my mom said, I'll move there, but you have to put a rose garden just like the one we have at the other house. Now, you know the story, I never promised you a rose garden? My dad had to promise a rose garden. So my dad, he's like 30 or 40 rose bushes. I love when roses look like that, but when they get like this, it's really beautiful, isn't it? Now, have you ever tried to take a bud and make it look like that? How does it work out? If you try to peel it open to make it look like that, what happens? It all falls apart, right? You can't do that. It only happens from the inside out. That's the only way it'll be transformed. Our lives, when we try to do it all ourselves from the outside, we screw it up pretty bad. But when God transforms us from the inside out, it changes everything. Are you allowing Him to change you? Are you giving Him power to transform your life? We want more peace, more love, more joy, more grace, more patience. It comes from this transformation. I'm going to pray for us, but just a couple of questions I'd like you to think about. Have you ever had an encounter with the Redeemer? Have you ever had an opportunity to look to Christ? It says salvation has come to your house today. To look to Jesus instead of all the other things. Do you meet with Him each day? Do you allow Him to speak to you, to change your heart? Are you meeting with others that love Him like you do? And is there any place that God is calling you to get out of your comfort zone? Maybe there's some place. Maybe you just need to write letters of encouragement to people. I don't know what God's asking of you, but is there a place that He's calling you out of your comfort zone?